I'm sure I'm not going to shock anybody when I say Republicans are still trying to use the southern border as a political football. That's right, folks. They are still using the southern border to play politics with. Instead of working together for the American people to solve this very challenging issue, they're playing politics. Now, I'm not saying that Democrats are immune to this type of behavior, but when it comes to the border specifically, Republicans are uniquely bad. Remember, it was last year that Republicans effectively killed a bipartisan border bill that was written by one of the most conservative members in Congress. Donald Trump gave his marching orders, and Republicans effectively shut it down. Donald Trump wanted this issue to run on in November, so they killed it. That's why it wasn't a huge surprise to me that Tony Gonzales went on Face the Nation this past weekend and was interviewed by Nancy Cortez, and he proved to us how bad faith Republicans are when it comes to this issue. So let's go ahead and take a look at what he had to say, and then we will go through some of the craziness that he brings to the table. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Talking about all year long, the number of migrant encounters along the southern border was hovering a little below 200,000 a month. Then this executive order went into place in early June, and those numbers plunged to 100,000 in July. They were cut in half. Are you ready to call this move a success?
Nancy, it's great to be here. You know, I represent nearly half of the overall southern border. I literally was on the border on Friday. What I can tell you is things are getting worse. And let me give you an example. So in the New Mexico area, to date, there's been 100 illegal immigrants that have perished, okay? Every part of the border is different. Parts of my district, it takes you 3 days humping through the desert in order to make it to the border. In the New Mexico area, it takes you 1 hour. So how is 100 people dying in 1 hour? The reason is these criminal organizations are holding these migrants in these stash houses for sometimes over a month, feeding them one meal and one bottle of water a day. So when it is time for them to finally make that trek, they give them caffeine pills and they try to rush them over. So in many cases, the humanitarian crisis along the border is getting worse.
So I'm sure all of you noticed that he didn't even come close to answering the question. The question was, border crossings have been cut in half ever since Biden issued his executive order. Do you call that success? And he wants to lie and say, the border's getting worse. He's just a fear-mongering idiot. Instead, he goes off on some tale, some one-off, about 100 migrants dying due to some criminal organization that was trying to get them across the border. That is a terrible story. But that has nothing to do with the data that she just presented to you. So she goes on to re-ask the question. You know, you guys have been calling on Biden to issue an executive order and shut down the border for years now. And now that he's finally done something about it, and it appears to be working, why are you guys still not happy? Or at least not even willing to acknowledge that things are improving? Let's go ahead and take a look at that really quick.
So you've been pushing for the administration to take executive action for years. They've now done it, and you're saying you're not happy about it, even though the numbers have come down so sharply?
Well, ask the 100 families that died. This is a part of the ugly part of it is so many people are dying, and those are the people that are dying. What about the people that are getting assaulted in other areas? It's getting worse. So people are looking at the numbers and thinking, oh, it's getting better. I look at it, who is coming over and what is happening to these people. In many cases, these criminal organizations, these Tren de Agua, TDA, they're growing in prominence. These Venezuelan gangs, they're all over the country, and they're seeping their tentacles into our society. We have to get ahead of this, and we need real solutions. Right. That real solution is holding these people accountable, deporting people that aren't here, and double down on legal work visas, people doing it the right way.
Right.
So I would agree with Tony here that we should definitely open up more avenues for people to come into this country legally. I totally agree. But that isn't the question she asked. She's asking, if numbers are coming down, if crossings or encounters have been cut in half, Why are you guys still not willing to say that something is working? Instead, he's trying to fearmonger about these one-off instances to try to scare the American people into thinking the border is still way out of control, nothing is improving, and in fact, it is getting worse. This is why we call these people bad faith on the issue. They don't want Joe Biden to have any sort of win, so they're unwilling to acknowledge something that he did that is making an improvement. So she goes on to ask, well, there have been solutions to try to address some of these issues at the southern border. What about the bipartisan border deal? Let's see what he had to say about that.
Right. So there are bipartisan proposals to deal with these very complicated problems you're describing. One of them was struck in the Senate, but former President Trump scuttled that deal, as you know. Do you wish that he would have allowed that to go forward?
There were some positive things out of that, the border package that the Senate was working on, but there were some very negative things. I wouldn't have voted for that. The reason I wouldn't vote for it, because it allowed 5,000 people to break the law before you enact it. The number should always be zero.
I just have to pause it right there. This is such an insane statement to make. The number should always be zero. Is that a reasonable standard to set? Is that a standard that we set in any other area of our lives? These are unserious people. Border crossings and encounters are not going to zero. It's not even a reasonable request to make. So I just thought that needed to be pointed out. I just couldn't believe that he actually said something so stupid.
We can both be firm on illegal immigration, and there was no talk of legal immigration. What about rewarding those that are doing it the right way? What about our allies in Afghanistan that we've left behind? There's some things that could have been done. It was a failed bill. There's thousands of these bills. That was a failed bill before it even gets going. I'm looking for serious partners.
So he's saying he's looking for serious partners, but when it comes to the bipartisan border deal that Republicans shut down, was he speaking out against that? He's mischaracterizing the bill as well, trying to say that, it legalized 5,000 people a day. That's not what it did. It just set a threshold of 4,000 to 5,000 people per day that would give the authority to actually shut down the border, including some asylum seekers. Without the bipartisan border bill, we don't have a mechanism to do that. And I just keep on coming back to his statement. Numbers should always be zero. What a ludicrous thing to say. And he doesn't want to contend with the fact that it was Republicans and Donald Trump that shut down the bipartisan border deal. An actual bill that would have addressed some of these problems. Instead, he wants to shirk responsibility. He wants to mischaracterize it and say, that bill wouldn't have done anything anyways. Okay, so what would you do about it? And that's the very next question that he gets asked. You have had all of these different solutions, or at least some solutions with the bipartisan border deal. Joe Biden has now issued an executive order addressing some of these problems. And you say that's not working. So what would you do? Let's go ahead and see his response.
Okay, but you say you want to solve the problem, and yet you don't like any of the bipartisan proposals out there. Are you writing your own?
I do. Yeah, I have a bill. It's actually 3 pages long. And what it does is it extends work visas from 1 year to 3 years, and it allows people to streamline the process. Instead of mailing in work visas, you do it online like everyone else. And there's also a border security piece to it, too. So you can do both. We can both be warm and welcoming, and we can both secure the border. All the proposals right now have no chance of it. And here's another thing. Has Tim Walz ever been to the border?
Is this dude serious? Why would Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, need to go to the southern border? In what world does this make sense? This is just another misdirect from Tony Gonzales here. Why would Tim Walz need to go to the border? In addition to that, what is this obsession with actually going to the physical border. Does that help you solve the problem better? No. This is just another unreasonable standard set by Republicans, another way for them to fearmonger or to talk poorly about Democrats because they don't travel to the border. It's just a bunch of nonsense, a way to misdirect from not really giving substantive answers to many of her questions. And then he talked about having a 3-page bill that he wrote that would solve some of these issues. I find that pretty amusing because back in 2023, February of 2023, we have this article from the Texas Tribune. It says Texas border Republican accuses GOP of using immigration crisis for politics. Kind of the exact same topic we are talking about now. So what did Tony Gonzales actually say? Let's go ahead and take a look really quick. U.S. Rep. Tony Gonzales from San Antonio accused his fellow Republicans of politicizing the border for their own benefit, further escalating his standoff with more conservative members of his party, who he said stood to gain from a sustained migration conflict. Okay, yeah, I agree. People do use this as a political football at times. Republicans do it often. So sure, he's calling it out. Good for Tony Gonzales. He goes on to say, anyone who thinks a 3-page anti-immigration bill with 0% chance of getting signed into law is going to solve the border crisis should be buying beachfront property in Arizona. This is what Gonzales tweeted Thursday night in an apparent reference to border legislation introduced by Chip Roy. So he just told Nancy Cortez that he has a 3-page immigration bill that would solve many of the issues that we're talking about. But early last year, he was criticizing these types of bills for what? Having no teeth, not being possible. If you think you're going to solve the immigration/border crisis in 3 pages, I think you'd be sorely mistaken. So I just thought that was pretty funny. Either way, Republicans prove to us time and time again that they are not serious players. They are not working with the other side to solve some of these issues for the American people. They are bad faith actors that wish to keep this an open issue so they have something to run on in their elections. And Donald Trump proved that even more by telling these Republicans to shut down that bipartisan border deal. So he had this issue to run on in November. So I think this is quite pathetic. These people should be mocked and ridiculed. They are not doing their jobs to solve these issues for the American people. And it is a damn shame. So that's going to do it for me on this one, folks. If you got anything out of this video, if you could remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe. Maybe share it with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. If you think I got something wrong, or if you disagree with me about something, feel free to drop a comment below. And if you want to learn about Project 2025's plan to curb your reproductive rights, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. And I will see you guys on the next one.